My name is Lisa Rodriguez. I'm 31 years old, and the moment my entire relationship collapsed didn't happen during a fight or a betrayal or even a tearful confession. It happened because of an Instagram poll. It was a Tuesday afternoon around 3:00 p.m. I remember the exact time because the entire office was loudly counting down to the end of a miserable meeting. My coworker Daniel walked toward my desk afterward with this strange, pinched expression, one I'd only ever seen when he had to tell someone their work got rejected. "Lisa, you need to see something," he said, hesitating before turning his phone toward me. I thought it would be a meme, maybe office gossip, maybe a cat video. Anything but the bright pink Instagram story belonging to my boyfriend of 3 years. A poll. Should I dump my boring girlfriend for this hottie at the gym? Below it played a video of him and a muscular, pretty gym girl doing partner workouts, her hands on his waist, his hands guiding hers, their bodies way too close, both of them laughing like they were already in on a secret I hadn't been told. I froze. My pulse didn't even rise. I just went completely still, like my body needed a full reboot. "Lisa, I'm sorry," Daniel murmured. "How long has this been up?" I whispered. "About an hour. 1 hour." Long enough for 83% of his followers to vote yes. Long enough for the internet to join a conversation I didn't even know I was a part of. And long enough for something inside me to simply turn off. I tapped the poll myself. I voted yes. There was no dramatic tear sliding down my cheek. No shaking hands. No silent scream. Just a cold clarity spreading through me, like the moment you finally stop fighting the current and let it take you. By 3:30 p.m., I had opened my banking app. By 3:35, I was calling utility companies. By 3:40, I was canceling the cable, the internet, and all the streaming accounts he used more than I ever did. My boyfriend made around $200 a month as a part-time fitness content creator. I made $95K as a project manager. I had paid the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, his car insurance, basically everything except his phone bill, and the gym membership he was apparently using to find my replacement. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't confront him. I just made decisions. At 4:00, I texted my landlord. The condo was technically mine. I owned it, but rented it out for tax reasons while still living in it. Complicated but legal. Giving 30-day notice. I'm vacating. At 5:00, I left work. My sister Maya met me outside with her truck, already guessing something terrible had happened. "What did he do?" she asked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence was answer enough. We had 2 hours before he typically came home from the gym, 2 hours to erase myself from a place we'd shared for a year. We moved efficiently, my clothes, my laptop, my work equipment, my TV, my mom's birthday gift I'd bought earlier that week, my books, my records, my old couch I'd brought from my first apartment, everything that was mine before he entered my life. I left his things untouched, his clothes, his grooming products, his influencer lighting, his endless pile of pre-workout tubs. Maya watched me with a mixture of awe and worry. "Liz, you're scaring me with how calm you are." "I'm tired," I finally said. "Just tired." I took photos of the condo, what I removed, what I left, slid my copy of the keys onto the counter. Then I wrote the note. "Saw your poll. I voted yes. You should definitely pursue the gym girl. I've moved out. Utilities will be disconnected Friday. Lease is in my name. You have until end of month to find new housing. Keys on the counter when you leave. Lisa." We finished moving everything by 6:45 p.m. I texted him one last time. "Congrats on the new relationship. I'm out." Blocked him. Blocked him everywhere. By 8:00 p.m., we were at Maya's apartment when her phone started lighting up. His name flashed across her screen again and again. She sighed and answered, putting it on speaker. "Where is she? What did she do? Why is all her stuff gone?" Maya looked at me. I shook my head. "She moved out," Maya said. He sputtered. "Moved out. Over a joke." It was a stupid meme poll. "Everyone knows those aren't serious. With videos of you and another woman," Maya asked bluntly. "Oh my God, is everyone insane? We're just friends." Maya didn't engage. "She doesn't want to talk to you." "This is insane. Put her on the phone." I shook my head again. "She's done," Maya said. "Don't call this number again." She hung up. He called 6 more times. She didn't answer. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not relief, just the quiet that comes after a long storm. But storms always have aftershocks. And his weren't done. By Friday afternoon, 3 days after the poll, everything shifted from humiliating to almost surreal. At 5:30 p.m., my office phone lit up with a forwarded call before I could stop the receptionist. The moment I heard his voice, I could picture his expression indignant, panicked, and completely unwilling to take responsibility. "Lisa, the power is off. The internet is off." "What did you do?" he snapped as if the world had personally wronged him. I kept my voice steady. "I canceled the services I was paying for." "You can't do that. I live here." "You're living in a condo I'm renting," I said. "I gave notice. I'm vacating. The utilities were in my name and I'm no longer paying them. So now you expect me to pay for everything. I expect you to figure out your living situation. You have until the end of the month. This is illegal. You can't just kick someone out." "I'm not kicking you out. I'm leaving. You were never on the lease." He tried shifting to guilt. "Because you said we didn't need to be. You said it was fine. And now you're doing all this over a joke." "Hilarious joke," I said flatly. I laughed so hard I moved out. "You're being ridiculous. My friends think you're insane. My mom says, 'Stop calling my work.'" I cut in. Then I hung up, blocked the office number, and sat back in my chair with a strange, quiet clarity. I had expected anger or guilt to follow, but instead there was only stillness. It wasn't relief, but the absence of chaos felt like a beginning. A weak beginning, maybe, but a beginning nonetheless. That night, he showed up at Maya's apartment and rang the doorbell for 15 minutes straight. We watched him through the Ring camera feed on her phone, pacing, wiping his face, alternating between demanding and pleading. He kept saying he was sorry that he wasn't actually going to leave me, that it was just content. It was strangely fitting. He had turned our relationship into content, and now his meltdown was becoming content too. Maya asked if I wanted her to answer the door. I told her no. Eventually he left, but not before posting a crying selfie to his story with the caption, "When your GF can't take a joke and ruins everything." The comments were split. Some people sided with him, saying women were too sensitive and that polls like that were just memes. Others told him to grow up, pointing out that publicly humiliating your partner wasn't cute, funny, or harmless. I didn't reply to a single comment, but his best friend's girlfriend managed to find my account and message me. "You're being immature. He's devastated. You're really throwing away 3 years over a harmless poll." I replied once he publicly humiliated me for engagement. I removed myself from the situation. "He's free to pursue the gym girl." She called me cruel. I blocked her. By Monday, things escalated again when the condo property manager called. My boyfriend had contacted him claiming I abandoned him and illegally disconnected utilities. The manager's tone said he was expecting drama, but not this kind. I explained everything, emailed him the documentation, the lease in my name, and even a screenshot of the poll. He was silent for a long moment before exhaling sharply. "So, he posted a poll asking if he should dump you," he asked. "And you just moved out?" "Yes." "That's cold," he said with a small laugh, "but that's consequences." He then confirmed that my boyfriend had until the end of the month. After that, the locks would be changed, and he'd legally be considered a trespasser. Week 2 brought a new wave of chaos. Somehow he found my mother's number and called her crying, insisting I was punishing him for a mistake. My mother told me later that she had asked him to explain exactly what he meant by mistake. When he sent her a screenshot of the poll, she didn't hold back. She told him, "If you publicly ask strangers whether you should dump my daughter, you can't be shocked when she helps you make that decision." Apparently he tried claiming he wasn't serious, to which she replied, "Then you shouldn't have posted it." After that conversation went nowhere, his mother called Maya's phone. She was furious, insisting I was being cruel and impulsive, that he deserved another chance, that people don't throw away 3-year relationships over one silly internet poll. She kept trying to paint him as the victim until I finally spoke for myself. "He didn't make a mistake," I said. "He made a choice, and I made mine." His mother tried guilt. She insisted he had done so much for me. I asked her to name one thing. She couldn't. I laid out the reality clearly. I had financially supported him for a year. He contributed almost nothing, and he took for granted that I'd continue doing so, no matter how he behaved. She claimed he'd be homeless. I reminded her he was an adult with 17 days left to figure it out. She hung up. 2 days later, the gym girl messaged me. She apologized, said she had no idea he filmed the workout for breakup content, admitted he'd shown up at the gym crying, and confirmed that management had banned him for causing a scene. She wanted me to know nothing happened between them. She had a girlfriend and had been uncomfortable with him from the start. That message didn't hurt. It clarified something. My boyfriend wasn't just irresponsible, he was reckless, inconsiderate, and desperate for attention. He had no respect for boundaries, his mine or anyone else's. And he wasn't unraveling because I left. He was unraveling because without me financially and emotionally supporting him, his entire life structure collapsed. In that moment, something inside me settled. I hadn't overreacted. I hadn't been dramatic. I hadn't been cruel. I had simply stopped carrying a weight he expected me to hold forever. He didn't lose me. He lost the life someone else worked to provide for him. Week 3 arrived with a kind of slow, inevitable heaviness. The apartment he once bragged about living in for free was now dark silent and without running water or power. According to his Instagram stories, most of which people were screenshotting and sending to Maya, he was living like a pioneer, as if the lack of electricity was some quirky lifestyle challenge instead of the natural consequence of his own choices. Even his followers were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. Why wasn't he moving? Why didn't he take responsibility? Why was he blaming me for leaving a situation he publicly mocked? He deleted the critical comments quickly, but not before people started noticing the pattern. Meanwhile, he tried reaching out again. Maya's phone buzzed with another text. Please, I can't find anywhere to live. Everything's too expensive. I don't have deposit money. Can we please talk? He had already tried guilt, anger, and desperation. Now he was trying negotiation. I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, I'm begging you. I'll apologize. I'll delete everything. I'll make it right. This time I texted back, you have 5 days. Figure it out. It was the calmest message I'd ever sent him, but it hit him harder than any argument could have. He spiraled into frantic paragraphs about how he had applied to 12 apartments, how every landlord wanted $3,000 up front, how he couldn't afford anything without a little help. I didn't reply. At some point, the truth had become too obvious. He wasn't looking for reconciliation. He was looking for someone to pay the bill. He sent one final message, I hope you're happy. You've ruined my life. I answered, I'm very happy, actually. Good luck with your living situation, and watched Maya block him from her phone with a firm tap. A couple of days later, things escalated again. The gym girl whose name I learned was Brianna posted a statement on her own account describing how he had been showing up at her gym, crying, begging her to talk to him, insisting she owed him clarification. The gym had officially banned him after he disrupted several members' workouts. In her message to me, she clarified again that absolutely nothing romantic had ever happened between them. She had a girlfriend and had made that clear. She seemed genuinely sorry for inadvertently being part of the drama. The more she explained, the clearer the pattern became. He acted as if anyone who accidentally participated in his content now had some responsibility to help him manage the consequences. That same afternoon, the condo property manager called me again. He sounded exhausted but amused, like he'd been forced to referee a situation he wished he hadn't been dragged into. My ex had been calling the office repeatedly, insisting they reinstate utilities and threatening to report the building to the city. The manager told him very plainly that he had no legal standing and reminded him he would be trespassing if he stayed past the end of the month. According to the manager, my ex had tried to frame me as vindictive and abusive, but then hilariously sent the screenshot of the poll as evidence. The manager told me he had never in his career seen someone provide their own self-incriminating proof so confidently. While all of that was happening, my mother invited me to dinner. She wanted to check on me, she said, and also wanted to update me on the call she'd had with his mother. My mother described the interaction with a raised eyebrow and an amused sigh. His mother had insisted I was being heartless, that he'd been so good to me, that relationships required forgiveness. My mother listened patiently and then replied with a calm, unshakable grace that only she could manage. Respect is the foundation of forgiveness. If he wanted forgiveness, he should have started with respect. That was the end of that conversation. Later that evening, as I sat with my mom over coffee, she added something that settled deeply into my mind. He's not upset because he lost a partner, Lisa. He's upset because he lost a safety net. She wasn't wrong. The more the days passed, the clearer it became. He wasn't mourning me or our relationship. He was mourning comfort, stability, and a financial cushion he had relied on without appreciating. In the final stretch before the eviction, he sent one more desperate message, this time a voice note, a weak, trembling whisper. Please, Lisa, I can't live like this. I don't have anywhere to go. I don't know what to do. I listened once, the old version of me, the one who constantly worried about everyone else before myself, would have answered. I would have gone back. I would have tried to rescue him. But that version of me had been fading ever since the moment I saw that pole. I deleted the message and turned my phone off. For the first time in years, I felt fully in control of my own life. He wasn't just falling apart. He was finally experiencing the weight of a life he had always expected someone else to hold up. And I was finally experiencing the freedom of not holding it anymore. The last week of the month arrived with an eerie quietness, like the hush before a storm hits. I wasn't there in person for the eviction. I didn't want to be, and I didn't need to be, but the property manager kept me updated through brief, almost bewildered text messages. From what he described, my ex reacted exactly as expected, a dramatic combination of denial, outrage, and performative sorrow. When management arrived with a constable to enforce the legal removal, he refused to open the door at first, insisting he had a right to stay because he had lived there for a year. The constable calmly explained again and again that living somewhere and being legally entitled to stay there were two entirely different things. He claimed he had nowhere to go. The constable reminded him that this wasn't the building's problem. Eventually backed into a corner, he did something predictable he called his mother. She showed up 20 minutes later with a U-Haul and a sort of furious energy that must have been exhausting to maintain. According to the property manager's retelling, she yelled at everyone in sight, the constable, the manager, the maintenance staff, even a neighbor who tried to enter the building. She insisted the eviction was illegal, immoral, even un-American. The manager, with the patience of a seasoned professional, explained that everything was being done by the book. My notice was properly filed. The lease was in my name. He had been warned. The law was clear. By the time they began moving his things into the truck, he was crying, she was still shouting, and the entire scene had the chaotic air of a family that had accidentally filmed their own reality show meltdown. When I read the property manager's final text, "He's out," locks changed. I felt a strange mix of closure and nothingness. Not happiness, not satisfaction, just the quiet confirmation that a door had closed, literally and figuratively. A few days later, a mutual friend, someone who had always floated on the outskirts of our social circle, sent Maya a message that trickled down to me. Apparently, my ex had moved back into his parents' cramped two-bedroom house and was now sleeping on their couch. His influencer brand had tanked. Several small clients dropped him when they learned about the poll, and he'd lost thousands of followers practically overnight. His attempt to spin the situation into sympathy content failed the moment people dug through the screenshots and realized he had publicly humiliated his partner and then been shocked by the consequences. With no income, no apartment, and no audience left to validate him, he had taken a full-time job in retail just to stay afloat. Around this time, something else happened, something that solidified the final unraveling of his public victimhood. The gym girl's girlfriend made a post that went unexpectedly viral. She called out my ex for using Brianna's image and body for breakup content without consent. She criticized him for exploiting women in his fitness videos to boost engagement and explained in blunt, clear terms that he had crossed boundaries repeatedly. The post gained traction faster than his original poll ever did, and within hours, people were dragging him across every platform he hadn't yet made private. He deleted his account 2 days later. While he unraveled, I rebuilt quietly. I stayed at Maya's for 2 months, took time to breathe, and relearned what it felt like to exist without tiptoeing around someone's ego. Eventually, I bought a smaller condo, not as big as the old place, but it was mine outright. No subletting complications, no financial burdens that belonged to someone else, no shadows of a life I didn't want anymore. I decorated it with plants, soft lighting, and quiet Saturday mornings. I slept better than I had in years. Then, one afternoon, while I was grocery shopping, it happened I saw him. He spotted me first and started walking over fast enough that I felt a flicker of old anxiety. I turned down another aisle, hoping he'd take the hint. He didn't. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "Saw you at the store. Too good to acknowledge me now," I replied. "Don't contact me again." He insisted he just wanted to apologize, that he knew he had been stupid, that he missed me. I told him the truth. "You miss having someone pay your bills." He said that wasn't fair. I said neither was the poll, and then I blocked the number. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting not on him, but on the space he once occupied in my life. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned itself out weeks ago. What remained was a clean emptiness. Not painful, just open. He had been someone I used to know, someone who made choices that revealed more about him than I had been ready to see. My coworker asked whether I regretted how I handled it. I didn't. My mother said she was proud of me for leaving a bad situation instead of letting it swallow me whole. She told me I had finally chosen my worth over someone else's convenience. Sometimes people think that a relationship ends in one moment, a fight, a revelation, a betrayal, but that's rarely true. Most endings happen slowly in small pieces until the last piece snaps. For me, it snapped when I realized he didn't see me as a partner, but as a background character in a story he was performing for strangers. He got the engagement he wanted. He just never expected to face the consequences that came with it. And I walked away with something better than vindication. I walked away with peace. Life after him unfolded in a way I didn't expect. There was no dramatic transformation, no sudden enlightenment, no triumphant montage of victories. It was quieter than that, calmer, steadier, like stepping into a room where the noise had finally stopped. What surprised me most wasn't how much my life changed, but how much lighter everything felt once the weight of his presence was gone. In the months that followed, I started piecing myself back together without even realizing it. I reconnected with old friends I'd drifted from, not because he ever forbade me from seeing them, but because the emotional exhaustion of carrying a relationship alone had shrunk my world down to something small and manageable. I picked up hobbies again, reading in parks, cooking new recipes, even joining a gym on the opposite side of town where the only poll anyone cared about was whether the treadmills were free. For once, the gym felt like a place where I could exist without constantly monitoring someone else's behavior. My therapist told me something that stuck with me. You don't heal by proving you're over it. You heal by no longer needing to prove anything at all. She was right. I wasn't trying to show anyone I was better, stronger, happier. I simply was. Then, one afternoon, a mutual friend reached out. Not Maya's friend, not mine alone, but someone who had known both of us in that vague social media acquaintance way. He sent a message. "Hey, I just wanted to check in. Your ex has been asking about you." I didn't reply at first. I was tired of the updates, the secondhand chaos, the excuses. When I finally answered, all I said was, "Why?" The friend responded, "I think he realizes what he lost." I stared at the message for a minute before typing. He didn't lose anything. He threw it away. There's a difference. The friend called it harsh. I called it accurate. The truth didn't need softening anymore. For years, I'd been bending reality around his feelings. I had no interest in doing that now. He allegedly wanted to know whether I was seeing anyone. Why it mattered was beyond me. Maybe he needed the illusion that what we had was still an open door he could walk through if life got too hard. Maybe he wanted proof that I hadn't moved on so he could feel less alone in the consequences he created. I didn't entertain any of it. I told a mutual friend not to tell him anything about my life. He agreed. A few weeks later, Maya and I were sitting on her balcony drinking iced tea when she asked whether I thought I'd ever forgive him. She wasn't accusing me or urging me to be the bigger person she genuinely wanted, to know what forgiveness meant to me now. I thought about it for a long moment. Forgive what exactly I finally answered. The poll. The humiliation. The entitlement. She nodded gently. Any of it, she said. I shook my head. I don't need to forgive him because I'm not carrying any of it anymore. Forgiveness is for things that still hurt. This doesn't. And that was the truth. I wasn't walking around angry or bitter. I wasn't replaying conversations or wishing I'd said different things. The situation had simply ended. The chapter had closed. The story didn't need an epilogue of forgiveness to justify my peace. Over time, I reflected on what the entire situation had taught me, not about him, but about myself. I realized how easily respect can erode when one partner stops valuing the other. I realized how dangerous it is to confuse stability with compatibility. Most of all, I realized how people treat you when they think you'll never leave reveals everything you need to know about them. He thought I was too steady, too loyal, too grounded to ever walk away. He never expected consequences because he assumed he was exempt from them. He believed he could turn our relationship into content, into jokes, into public entertainment, because he didn't believe I was capable of choosing myself. He miscalculated, and miscalculations have consequences. A few months after the eviction, the condo manager called one last time. The unit had been repaired, cleaned, and repainted after the chaos. He offered me the lease back at a discount, knowing how unpleasant the last few months had been. I considered it for a moment, returning to something familiar, reclaiming a space that had once felt like home. But in the end, I declined. Too many memories hung in the corners of those walls, memories I had no desire to revisit. He understood. Instead, I sank deeper into the rhythm of my new place. Quiet mornings, sunlight on the kitchen counter, evenings where I cooked whatever sounded good without worrying about someone else complaining or hovering. I didn't rush into dating, didn't feel pressured to move on, the way some people think healing should look. I went on a few casual dates, enjoyed conversations that didn't drain me, and relearned what it meant to feel genuinely seen. Nothing serious came from it, and for once that didn't bother me at all. One night, as I sat on my couch with a cup of tea, I thought back to the poll, the stupid, careless, thoughtless poll that changed everything. Some people would say I overreacted. Some would say I should have laughed it off. But the poll wasn't the issue. It was the mindset behind it. It was a reflection of a pattern I had ignored for too long, a pattern of disrespect, entitlement, and the belief that I would always be the stable, forgiving, reliable presence who cleaned up his messes. I realized then that I hadn't overreacted at all. I had finally reacted appropriately. And if I were ever faced with the same choice again, humiliation or self-respect, I would walk out just as quickly, just as calmly, and just as completely. Some endings aren't tragedies. Some endings are beginnings disguised as loss. And some endings are just a quiet decision to no longer negotiate with disrespect. I chose peace, and I chose myself. It turns out that was all I ever needed. My name is Gina Magner, and on an ordinary Thursday morning, I learned how quickly a life that feels stable can suddenly collapse. I had been with my company for 6 years, building a solid career in product management, proud of the teams I led and the products we launched. When the new parent corporation acquired us, there were rumors of restructuring, but no one really thought an entire division would be wiped out. Yet there I was, at 10 a.m., sitting across from an HR representative who could barely look me in the eye, while she explained that the entire product department was being eliminated. 73 people were losing their jobs, and I was one of them. It wasn't personal. It wasn't about poor performance. It was business, brutal, impersonal corporate business. But the fact that it wasn't my fault didn't stop the shock from hitting like a punch to the chest. By 11 a.m., my desk was packed into a flimsy cardboard box that felt far too small to hold 6 years of my life. By noon, I was sitting in my car in the parking garage, staring at my phone, trying to process everything, while deciding who to call first. I chose the person I believed would give me comfort, my boyfriend Caleb. We had been together for over a year, long enough that I thought we understood each other, long enough that I believed he cared about more than appearances. He answered casually, chewing food clearly out at lunch. "Hey babe, what's up?" I hesitated, hoping for warmth, hoping for even the smallest bit of support. "Caleb, I got laid off." There was a pause, not the worried kind, not the soft kind, a calculating kind. "What do you mean laid off?" "The acquisition," I explained. "They cut the whole product team." More silence. Longer than before. I could almost hear him thinking not about me, but about what this meant for him. When he finally spoke, his tone had gone cold. "So, you're unemployed." "For now," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I have a strong severance package and savings. I'll be fine." He replied. Like my entire life suddenly made him uncomfortable. He said we would talk later and hung up before I could say another word. I spent the next several hours doing the things you're supposed to do, updating LinkedIn, notifying a few colleagues, making lists of companies to contact. I tried to handle it rationally, but underneath it all was the fear that the man who claimed to love me was reacting to this in exactly the wrong way. Still, I told myself to wait until the evening, have dinner together, talk about next steps, comfort each other. I even made pasta with the creamy vodka sauce he always raved about. He walked into my apartment at around 7:00 p.m. At first, he didn't speak. He simply looked at the dinner I'd prepared, then at me, then back at the table in a way that made my stomach sink. Finally, he said the words every person dreads. "We need to talk." He stood stiffly, arms crossed, and delivered his practice speech. "I've been thinking all afternoon, Gina, and I don't think I can do this." Do what I asked, though, I already knew. This, us, dating someone who's unemployed. I stared at him in disbelief. "Caleb, it's been 8 hours since the layoff." I know he snapped, and I'm sorry. But I can't be with someone who doesn't have a job. I've worked too hard to build my life, and I can't let anyone drag me down. Drag you down, I repeated, stunned. Caleb, it was a company-wide layoff, not a personal failure. That doesn't matter, he said. People don't care about reasons. They care about results. My parents already ask about you. My friends know about us. What am I supposed to tell them now that my girlfriend doesn't have a job? His voice wasn't shaking with concern. It was shaking with embarrassment. That was the moment something in me shifted. I suddenly saw every red flag I had brushed aside, how obsessed he was with other people's opinions, how he judged coworkers who earned less, how he exaggerated his own achievements to impress others, how he treated status like a currency. I realized he didn't love me. He loved the version of me that made him look successful. You're embarrassed, I said quietly. He scoffed. Don't twist this. I just have standards, Gina. You know how hard I've worked. I can't date someone who's suddenly this. I didn't even ask what this meant. I already knew. In his mind, I had become a liability, an inconvenience, an image problem. That was when everything inside me settled. I felt no anger, no tears, only clarity. You're right, I said calmly. He blinked confused. What? You're right. You shouldn't date someone who doesn't meet your standards. And clearly I don't anymore. He tried to backpedal, stuttering something about needing time, but I didn't let him reshape the story. I think you should stay with your parents or a friend tonight. I'll box up your things. His face flushed with disbelief. You're kicking me out. I live here. The lease is in my name, I replied. You moved in with me. He sputtered, furious and shocked. He expected begging concessions, dramatic pleas. Instead, he found someone who finally recognized her own worth. You're going to regret this, he said, grabbing his bag and slamming the door so hard the frames rattled. When the apartment fell silent, I exhaled for the first time all day. I sat at the table alone, eating cold pasta and absorbing the strange, unexpected peace spreading through my chest. I had been so busy worrying about losing my job that I hadn't realized I was losing something heavier myself. The layoff had made him reveal who he truly was, and in doing so, it freed me. I didn't know it yet, but this moment was the beginning of a transformation. Not of him, he'd already shown me everything I needed to know, but of me. The woman he walked out on was about to become someone he would never have imagined, someone he would eventually come crawling back to. And he had no idea how different things would be when he did. In the days after the breakup, my apartment felt strangely new. The silence that used to feel heavy now felt spacious, almost comforting. Without Caleb's constant commentary about appearances, success, or how other people might judge him, the rooms felt lighter. I didn't realize how much of myself I had been shrinking, softening, and editing just to keep the peace. Now, with him gone, the air finally belonged to me again. But the reality of being unemployed still lingered in the background, a quiet pressure that followed me from room to room. I refused to let it consume me. I treated my job search like a full-time job, waking up early, making coffee, setting up my laptop at the dining table, and diving into applications. The severance package gave me breathing room, and my savings were untouched. As long as I stayed focused, I'd be fine. Within 3 weeks, I had 2 promising leads. Both were respectable companies with solid reputations, but neither felt like the kind of career leap I truly wanted. I kept pushing, kept networking, kept reminding myself that I had built my career on more than luck. Then, in the 5th week, something unexpected happened. I received a message from a recruiter representing one of the most prestigious companies in the industry, the kind of company people dream about. The kind Caleb had applied to twice before meeting me, twice rejected, the one he couldn't stop talking about, the one he insisted he deserved to work at someday. The email from the recruiter was short and almost casual. Hi, Gina. We reviewed your background and believe you'd be an excellent fit for a senior strategy role. Would you be open to a conversation? At first, I thought it was a mistake. I had applied months ago and assumed the application disappeared into the void like so many others. When I opened the job description, Director of Product Strategy, I almost laughed. It was 2 levels above my previous role. I reread it 3 times, waiting for the universe to tell me I misread something. But no, it was real. The initial phone screen went smoothly. So did the first virtual interview. By the 2nd round, I began to sense something I hadn't felt in a long time: momentum. People weren't just interested, they were impressed. They asked about my leadership style, my problem-solving methods, my product vision, and instead of shrinking myself the way I often had with Caleb, I spoke clearly, confidently, genuinely. By the time I reached the final round with the executive team, I was cautiously hopeful. Still, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to jinx it. Meanwhile, Caleb had begun to unravel. The first week after the breakup, he messaged me from 3 different numbers. He insisted we had overreacted, that we should talk it out like adults, as if his dismissal of my entire identity could be smoothed over with a mature tone. I ignored him. Week 2. The messages became more frustrated. "You're being really unreasonable," he wrote. "A relationship ending over a layoff, people are saying you're having some kind of episode." Week 3, he switched to guilt. "I think we both said things we didn't mean. We should fix this before it gets worse." Week 4, the tone turned accusatory. "You still have some of my things. You can't legally keep them. I looked it up. If you don't return them, I'll involve authorities." I had boxed his things on day 2. He chose never to pick them up. I stayed calm, blocked each number as it came, and refocused on my interviews. Then one morning, as I was reviewing notes for a second-round interview with the CEO, my phone rang. Not a text, a call. The number wasn't familiar, but it wasn't blocked either. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Hello, Ms. Magner," the voice said warmly. "I'm pleased to inform you that the team would like to extend you an offer." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room felt too small, too bright. The executive continued talking salary, benefits, equity, but the words blurred. All I heard was, "They want you. You earn this." When I finally saw the number on the offer letter, my hands shook. The compensation was almost double my previous salary. The title was Vice President of Product Strategy. I accepted before the ink metaphorically dried. For the first time since the layoff, I felt the ground return beneath my feet, not because of the title or the money or the prestige, though all of it mattered, but because I knew deeply that this achievement was mine. Not Caleb's, not anyone else's. Mine. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing for the role. I set up a proper work-from-home office, bought new notebooks and pens, reorganized my calendar, and created a routine that made me feel grounded. Every night I cooked dinner for myself, sat at my table, and realized that my life was finally becoming my own. And then inevitably, Caleb found out. I don't know how. Maybe a mutual friend mentioned something. Maybe he stalked my LinkedIn from a burner account. Maybe someone forwarded him my update. It didn't matter. The result was the same. A message request appeared from an unfamiliar Instagram account. Just a simple, "Is this you?" I ignored it. Then came an email to my personal inbox. "Congratulations on the new job. Can we talk?" I deleted it. But Caleb wasn't someone who took silence as an answer. 2 days after my official acceptance, my phone rang again. The number was unknown. I almost ignored it, but expecting a call about a furniture delivery, I answered. "Hello." "Oh my God, Gina, you actually picked up." My blood ran cold. It was him. I didn't let my voice shake. "How did you get this number? I blocked you." "I borrowed a friend's phone," he said quickly. "Look, I just wanted to say congratulations. Seriously, I always knew you'd land on your feet." "You called me a burden on the worst day of my life," I said. "You didn't know anything." I panicked, he insisted. "I was stupid. I know that now." "So, what do you want?" I asked. There was a beat of silence, the kind that reveals the truth before it's spoken. "I was hoping we could meet for coffee. There's something I need to talk to you about." Everything inside me knew what this was. He wasn't calling to apologize. He wasn't calling because he missed me. He needed something. And I wanted to hear exactly what. "Fine," I said. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m., the cafe near my old building." "I'll be there," he said quickly, almost desperately. When the call ended, I sat very still, hands folded, breathing evenly. It was the first time I realized something important. I wasn't nervous anymore. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't angry. I felt nothing, and sometimes nothing is the most powerful feeling in the world. The next afternoon, I arrived at the cafe 5 minutes early. Caleb was already there, sitting at a corner table with a posture that tried to look casual but carried the unmistakable tension of someone waiting for a verdict. He looked different, tired, a little thinner, with dark circles beneath his eyes. The confident, polished version of him, the one so obsessed with appearances, seemed to have been sanded down by life in the months since he walked out of my apartment. Even the way he held his coffee cup looked uncertain, like he wasn't sure what identity to wear anymore. When he saw me, his entire face brightened, then immediately softened into something more carefully rehearsed. "Gina, hi. Thank you for coming." His tone was warm, too warm, like practiced sincerity. I sat across from him without returning the smile. "What did you want to talk about?" He opened his mouth, closed it again, then started with a sigh that sounded deliberately emotional. First, I'm proud of you. Really. VP at that company. That's incredible. You always were talented. I didn't respond. Compliments from someone who once weaponized my lowest moment meant nothing now. He continued, I've had a lot of time to think about everything. About how I reacted, about how I spoke to you. I handled the layoff horribly. You didn't deserve that. You're right, I said calmly. I didn't. The blunt agreement startled him. He tried to regroup. I guess what I'm saying is, I'm sorry. I panicked. I thought losing your job meant losing control, and I didn't know how to handle that. You made my crisis about your reputation, I said. There's a difference. He winced. Yeah, I know that now. He hesitated, and for the first time I noticed his leg bouncing under the table. Look, things have been harder than expected on my end. I waited. I had some financial setbacks, he said, pretending to laugh at himself. You know how life can pile on sometimes. I said nothing, letting the tension stretch. He continued. After we broke up, I tried to keep things together. But my car payment, credit cards, student loans, everything hit at once. And there were some expenses I wasn't prepared for. What kind of expenses? I asked. He pretended to hesitate, as if embarrassed, but his explanation came too quickly to be genuine. Well, after we split, I took a trip with the guys. I just needed to clear my head. It wasn't cheap, and then other things came up. I guess I got a little carried away. So you went on vacation while drowning in debt, I said flatly. It wasn't like that. I needed a break. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if the intimacy might soften me. And then my salary got reduced. Company-wide adjustment. They're cutting bonuses this year, too. It's been rough. Caleb, I said calmly, what do you actually want? His shoulders sagged, and the mask finally fell away. I need help, he said quietly. Financial help. There it was, the truth sitting between us like a stain spreading across the table. How much I asked, though, I already knew the number would be large. He swallowed. 8,000 would be enough to get me completely back on track. But honestly, even 5 would make a huge difference. Just a loan. I'd pay you back, I swear. For a moment, he looked hopeful, so hopeful it almost felt cruel to watch. But cruelty wasn't what I felt. It was clarity. Caleb, I said evenly, I'm not giving you money. His expression collapsed. What? Why not? You walked out on me when I needed support the most. You didn't hesitate. You weren't confused. You were embarrassed. Now that you need support, you suddenly remember how to be humble. That's not fair. He tried. I apologized. I said I made mistakes. An apology doesn't erase a pattern, I said. You didn't judge me based on a temporary setback. You judged me based on what you thought I no longer offered you. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly unraveling. Gina, please. I wouldn't come to you if I had anyone else. My parents already helped me, and they're disappointed in me. They're not willing to bail me out again. So you came to the woman you abandoned, I said. His eyes glistened, not from genuine emotion, but from fear. This could ruin my credit. I could lose my car. I might even... He stopped, swallowed hard. Please. I'm asking you as someone who once loved you. No, I said firmly. You're asking me as someone who once benefited from what you thought I offered. There's a difference. Why are you being so cold? He demanded, voice cracking. You always said you wanted to help people. You always said you cared. I do care, I said quietly. Just not enough to let you treat me like a savings account. He stared at me stunned. So that's it. After everything we had. What we had ended the moment you called me a burden when I needed you most. He shook his head. You're wrong. I loved you. You loved the image of a girlfriend with a stable job, a nice salary, and a reputation you could brag about, I said. When that image cracked, you didn't see me anymore, just the reflection of your own insecurity. He fell silent, not because he understood, but because he had run out of ways to manipulate the moment. I stood. Good luck, Caleb, truly, but don't contact me again. He looked up, eyes wide, panic flickering behind them. Gina, wait, please just think about it. Don't go. I pushed in my chair. Goodbye. I walked out of the cafe without looking back. The cold air outside felt crisp and clean, like the kind of air that arrives after a storm clears. For the first time since the layoff, I felt the weight of the past lift off my shoulders completely. As I walked down the street, I realized something surprising. There wasn't even a trace of sadness. No heartbreak. No second-guessing. Just freedom. Freedom from a man who couldn't imagine a partner beyond what she provided him. Freedom from the version of myself that tolerated crumbs disguised as affection. Caleb's downfall wasn't my responsibility. His mistakes weren't mine to absolve, and his financial chaos, his desperation, his panic, none of it belonged to me. But what I didn't know then was that his troubles were only beginning, and soon the consequences of his choices would collide with my new life in a way neither of us could have predicted. In the weeks after our coffee meeting, I didn't think about Caleb much. I was settling into my new position, navigating the transition from individual contributor to executive leader. The role came with real responsibility strategy meetings, with the CEO managing directors, shaping product roadmaps, negotiating budgets. It was demanding, intense, and exhilarating. Every morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Every night, I went to bed tired but fulfilled. But while my life was stabilizing, Caleb's was unraveling. I didn't check his social media or ask anyone about him, but mutual friends somehow decided I should know what was happening. Maybe they assumed I still cared. Maybe it was gossip. Or maybe people simply love reporting drama to the person who unintentionally started it. Whatever the reason, updates trickled in whether I wanted them or not. The first piece of news came from an old coworker of his, whom I ran into during a conference. After a few polite exchanges, she lowered her voice and said, "I heard things have been difficult for Caleb lately." She didn't elaborate, but the look in her eyes told me everything. Sympathy mixed with embarrassment, never a good sign. A few days later, another mutual acquaintance mentioned that Caleb had been forced to sell his car, the same car he used to obsess over, brag about polish every weekend, and flaunt as proof that he was ahead in life. The same car he used to imply separated him from people he considered less driven. He had sold it to scrape together money for overdue payments and credit card debt. With what remained, he bought a 12-year-old Honda Civic. According to the acquaintance, he'd been so ashamed of the downgrade that he parked 3 blocks away from his apartment building so his neighbors wouldn't see it. Another week passed, and someone else casually mentioned that Caleb had moved back into his parents' home, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't afford his rent anymore after the salary cut. His parents, who once loved telling their friends about his promising future, were reportedly furious and disappointed. They had helped him pay off some of his debts, but refused to indulge him further when he continued to mismanage his finances. I didn't take pleasure in hearing any of this. I didn't feel vindicated or triumphant. If anything, I felt detached, like I was hearing about a stranger, not someone who once slept beside me. His collapse no longer belonged to my life. It was simply the natural consequence of choices he had made long before I exited the picture. One evening, after a long strategy session at work, I came home, reheated some leftover soup, and finally logged into LinkedIn to post a brief update about my new role. My inbox exploded instantly. Colleagues, old friends, recruiters. I was reading through the messages when a notification appeared from HR. New applicant for marketing coordinator, your division. Normally, I wouldn't receive notifications for entry-level roles, but apparently the system was set to inform VP-level leaders about applicants across the division. It was a routine message, until I saw the name, Caleb Whitmore. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. My soup went cold in my hands. Of all the places he could have applied, of all the companies in the world, he chose the one where I now held an executive title. I couldn't tell if he knew, or if this was some desperate flailing attempt to grasp at prestige. Either way, the irony was too sharp to ignore. Carefully, deliberately, I clicked open the application. His resume looked almost identical to the version I remembered, slightly embellished, language generic descriptions, achievements inflated in a way that didn't match reality. His cover letter was enthusiastic, but in a way that felt performative. And the role he applied for marketing coordinator was an entry-level position. His experience didn't align with it at all. For a moment, I wondered what he imagined would happen. Did he think I would see his name and feel compelled to help him? Did he think our past gave him leverage? Did he assume I'd want to prove something? Or was he hoping I'd feel guilty for not giving him money and therefore owe him a professional lifeline? I closed my laptop and took a long breath, then opened it again. I reminded myself of something important. I owed him nothing, neither help nor sabotage. Fairness meant treating him like any other applicant. So that's exactly what I did. I forwarded his application to the recruiting coordinator with zero commentary. I removed myself from the review process entirely. No influence, no rejection, no favoritism. I wanted the system to speak for itself. 2 days later, HR sent another automated notice. Applicant declined, does not meet role requirements. No interview, no phone screen, not even a follow-up question from the hiring manager. He had applied for a job he wasn't qualified for at a company he had once claimed didn't recognize real talent when they rejected him years ago. Nothing about that had changed. He was still unqualified, still unprepared, still convinced that the universe owed him an opportunity he hadn't earned. I didn't know whether he realized I had seen his application. Part of me wondered if he'd assume I blocked him on purpose. Another part of me wondered if he'd spiral even further, but mostly I didn't think about it much at all. I had bigger things to focus on: my new team, my new responsibilities, the path unfolding ahead of me. But the updates didn't stop. A friend who still spoke to Caleb mentioned that he was convinced someone had sabotaged his job chances. He thinks someone blacklisted him, she said. He's been telling people that his resume is getting blocked behind the scenes. I almost laughed. The truth was far less dramatic. His resume wasn't blacklisted. He simply wasn't good enough. His skills weren't competitive, and his work history didn't match what he applied for. His downfall required no villain. It was self-sustained. Still, the irony wasn't lost on me. Months ago, Caleb looked at my layoff and saw weakness, failure, a burden he couldn't afford to shoulder. Now he was the one unraveling, and I was the one rising into the life he always fantasized about but never worked hard enough to earn. Life has a strange sense of justice sometimes. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. One evening, while reviewing a quarterly roadmap, I found myself staring at a spreadsheet, thinking about how everything had shifted since that Thursday morning in the parking garage. The layoff that had seemed like the end of my stability had become the beginning of something transformative. The breakup that had felt like a second blow had turned out to be an unshackling. And Caleb, well, Caleb was simply facing the truth. He had spent years trying to outrun image collapses quickly when it isn't supported by effort. He would blame the world. He would blame circumstances. He might even blame me. But deep down, I knew he would never blame the one person responsible for the mess he was in: himself. By the time 5 months passed since the breakup, my life had shifted into a version of stability I didn't even know I was capable of achieving. The VP role fit me in a way that felt almost surreal. Every challenge that came with the job, managing cross-functional teams, presenting strategy to the board, negotiating timelines, guiding younger managers, made me stronger, sharper, and more certain that losing my old job had been the universe's unexpected way of opening the right door. I wasn't the same woman who had once sat in her car in a parking garage, afraid of what the future might hold. Now I woke up each morning with clarity, purpose, and a quiet gratitude for the strange, difficult journey that brought me here. Despite all this growth, I couldn't fully escape occasional updates about Caleb. People brought him up the same way they mention weather casually, without considering how irrelevant it might feel to the person listening. Maybe they thought I still needed closure. Maybe they thought I should know how karma was treating him. Or maybe they simply enjoyed the drama. I never asked for these updates, but they came anyway, floating into my awareness like uninvited reminders. The story was always the same. Caleb was struggling. Some days it was the financial fallout, his credit score dropping, more missed payments, his parents refusing to loan him more money. Other days it was the emotional deterioration. He was depressed, angry, blaming everyone except himself. And always somewhere in the recounting, someone would say, "He told people you sabotaged him," as if I would care enough to orchestrate his downfall. Apparently, Caleb had constructed a narrative where I personally blocked him from career opportunities. He told friends he had insider information that someone at my company was blacklisting him. He hinted that I was still bitter, still vindictive, still holding a grudge. He spun elaborate stories about how he was being unfairly shut out because I wanted revenge. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so sad. I never needed to sabotage him. His resume, his choices, his lack of preparation, they did all the work for me. The jobs he applied for were mismatched to his experience. The industries he targeted required portfolios he didn't have. The opportunities he chased demanded the discipline he had never cultivated. He wanted prestige without substance. The universe simply reflected that back to him. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. The same man who once said he couldn't date someone unemployed was now underemployed, buried in debt, and living in the very situation he used to mock in others. Meanwhile, the woman he dismissed for being a burden had risen into a career he used to say he deserved. Life's symmetry, subtle and sharp, was almost poetic. But poetic symmetry wasn't the part that stayed with me. What stayed with me was the calm, the steady, unshakable calm I felt whenever someone mentioned him. There was no anger, no sadness, no lingering attachment. When people described his struggles, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt distance, as if they were talking about a character from a book I'd finished long ago. One night after a difficult week filled with back-to-back presentations and negotiations, I sat on my balcony with a cup of herbal tea. The city lights blurred softly below, cars moving like silent streaks of color through the darkness. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and let myself reflect not on Caleb, but on how everything had changed. For the first time in years, I felt fully in control of my life. I was no longer bending myself around someone else's insecurities. I no longer measured my worth by someone else's expectations. I no longer apologized for being ambitious or for being human. I no longer accepted scraps of affection packaged as love. Losing my job and losing my relationship had felt catastrophic in the moment, but now I saw them for what they truly were: necessary endings. Some people imagine closure as a confrontation, a final conversation where truths are spilled and emotions laid bare. But real closure, the mature kind, usually arrives quietly. It doesn't ask for attention. It doesn't demand validation. It just settles inside you one day when you realize the memories no longer sting, the fears no longer whisper, and the past no longer has anything left to teach you. A week later, I went on my first date since everything happened. Not because I was looking for someone new to fill the space Caleb had once occupied. There was nothing left to fill. I simply felt ready to meet people again, curious about what life might bring. The man was kind, thoughtful, a bit nervous, which I found unexpectedly endearing. We talked about movies, travel goals, and work, and not once did he ask about salaries, titles, or what my role could offer him. He seemed genuinely interested in me as a person. That alone made the evening feel like progress. I wasn't rushing anything. I didn't need a relationship to feel complete. But it was comforting to see that connection could exist without performance, without insecurity, without someone constantly gauging whether I enhanced their image. It made me hopeful, something I hadn't felt in a long time. A few days later, I heard the final update about Caleb. A former mutual friend called to tell me he had taken a lower-paying job in a different industry after months of rejections. He was still living with his parents, still driving the old Civic, still blaming external forces for his situation, still spinning stories about how others had failed him. The friend sounded hesitant, almost apologetic when she finished explaining. "I just thought you'd want to know," she said. "I appreciate the update," I replied, "but honestly, it has nothing to do with me anymore." And that was the truth. Not a performance, not a declaration, just truth. As I hung up the phone, I realized how far I'd come. Caleb's downfall wasn't my triumph. My success wasn't his punishment. We weren't connected anymore, not through love, not through resentment, not through obligation. Our stories had diverged completely, and his path was no longer something I felt responsible for or affected by. The only thing that mattered was what I had learned along the way. I learned to trust my instincts. I learned that a partner should be a teammate, not a critic. I learned that love requires empathy, not ego. I learned that losing something can be the first step toward gaining something better. And most importantly, I learned that people show you who they are in the moments that test them. When Caleb looked at me on the worst day of my life, he didn't see a woman deserving compassion. He saw an obstacle to his image. And when he came back months later asking for money, he didn't see a person, he saw a resource. Understanding that changed me. It made me more selective, more grounded, more whole. Not harder, not colder, just wiser. As I looked out my balcony window that night, watching the skyline glow against the darkness, I felt a quiet certainty settle into me. I was exactly where I needed to be. Not because everything had gone smoothly, far from it, but because everything had unfolded in a way that pushed me toward myself. If anyone asked me now for advice, I would tell them this: when someone shows you their true character, believe them. When someone turns their back on you during your darkest moment, let them walk away. And when life knocks you down, don't assume the fall means failure. Sometimes it means you're being repositioned for something greater. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't orchestrate karma. I simply kept moving. And somehow, through all the chaos and hurt, life rebuilt itself around me in a shape that finally felt like my own. My name is Dorothy Garrett, And until a few weeks ago, I thought my life was on a steady, beautiful path, one that led straight down an aisle, lined with white roses and vows, whispered beneath soft lights. I was 31, engaged to my boyfriend, Brandon Harper, 29. After 4 years together and 8 months of planning a future I thought we both wanted. We were supposed to be married in 6 weeks. I remember waking up that Sunday morning with the kind of peace you can't manufacture warm sunlight. Brandon humming in the kitchen, the scent of coffee drifting into our room. When he suggested we go to brunch with his 3 closest friends, it felt like the kind of lazy, spontaneous moment couples cherish before wedding chaos hits. He said it would be fun, relaxed, nothing special. I nodded, completely unsuspecting. The restaurant was buzzing when we arrived, mimosas clinking silverware, chiming warm chatter, floating through the air. His friends adored him, and I adored seeing him with them. We were mid-laugh about bridesmaid dresses when it happened. Brandon suddenly went silent. Not thoughtful quiet, not emotional quiet. This was dead quiet, the kind that pulls the air out of the room. His friends noticed first. "You okay?" one of them asked. Brandon swallowed, his hands trembling just slightly. Then he looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. Cold. Resolve without compassion. Distance without warning. "I need to say something," he breathed. Part of me thought he was going to tell me something sweetly terrifying, like he wanted to change venues, or that maybe, just maybe, he thought I was pregnant. My mind tried so hard to prepare for something normal, something survivable, but nothing could have prepared me for what he said. "I can't do this anymore, Dorothy. I'm calling off the wedding. I don't love you anymore." Just like that, at brunch, in front of his 3 friends, with a waiter walking up behind him carrying my untouched eggs Benedict. His friends gasped. One covered her mouth, another whispered, "Oh my God, are you serious?" For 10 seconds, maybe more, I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't exist. My heart just thudded once hard like it was slamming a door. Then, something strange washed over me. Calm. Crystal clarity. As if my mind stepped into a new body that knew exactly what to do, even while my heart was collapsing. "Thank you for your honesty," I said quietly. I held out my hand. "The ring, please." He blinked fast, thrown off balance for the first time since this began. "What?" "The engagement ring. It's mine. Or more accurately, it was my grandmother's. I'd like it back." His friends watched with rapt fascination like the world's cruelest reality show. Brandon's face drained, but he slid the ring off and placed it in my palm. Cold metal. Colder moment. I pocketed it, then I stood up. "Well," I said with the calmness of someone floating outside her own body, "this changes plans. I was going to host a wedding reception in 6 weeks. Now I'll be hosting a dodged a bullet party instead. Same venue, same catering, same open bar. You're all still invited." His friends giggled, nervous, disbelieving laughter. They thought I was joking. I wasn't. And about those wedding expenses, I continued, my voice steady and terrifying even to myself. The $62,000 in deposits you insisted on putting in your name to prove you're an independent modern man. Those are all yours now. Congratulations on your independence. The laughter died instantly. Brandon's face turned white. "What, Dorothy? Wait. Your name is on everything, Brandon. The venue deposit, the catering, the photographer, the flowers. Remember, you said it was important for your credit building and personal growth. So, enjoy." One of his friends whispered, "Oh no." I leaned in slightly. "And one more thing. My uncle had planned to gift us $150,000 for the wedding. It was already arranged. But since the wedding isn't happening," I shrugged, "that's gone too." Silence. Heavy, humiliating silence. I placed $40 on the table for the food I never touched. "Enjoy brunch, ladies. I've got a party to plan." And then I walked out. Only when I reached my car did my composure crack. My hands shook so violently I had to grip the steering wheel to steady them. I sat there for 20 minutes, the world blurring outside the windshield. I replayed every second, his voice, his expression, the public ambush. I wondered if the calm I'd shown was strength or shock, maybe both. But even through the tremors, one truth kept rising to the surface like a buoy. He chose the moment. He chose the audience. He wanted the humiliation. And I refused to give him the satisfaction of breaking me there. I didn't know it yet, but brunch was only the opening blow. What came after? The messages, the pressure, the unraveling would turn this single betrayal into a full-scale emotional war. But in that moment in my car, with my grandmother's ring burning a hole in my pocket, I whispered to myself, "This isn't over. Not for Brandon. Not for me. Not for the truth that was still hiding beneath his sudden cruelty. I thought walking out of that restaurant was the end of it. I thought the humiliation Brandon handed me at brunch would be the worst part. But apparently, when someone detonates a bomb in your life, the aftershocks don't care about timing. They don't care about dignity either. It began barely 2 hours after I left. I was still sitting on my couch, replaying the way Brandon's voice didn't even tremble when he said he didn't love me anymore when the notifications started pouring in. My phone kept buzzing until it felt like an alarm. At first, I didn't look. I couldn't. But when I finally turned it over, I saw names I recognized only because they belonged to his people, his friends, his mother, his sister. None of them had ever reached out to me this aggressively before. Now suddenly, I was the villain in a story Brandon wrote. You can't just abandon him with all that debt. That money was meant for both of you. Be reasonable. You two were planning a wedding. Not a single message said, "Are you okay?" The phone rang again. I answered without thinking, and Brandon's mother's voice slammed into me like a storm. You can't do this to Brandon, $62,000, Dorothy. He'll be financially ruined. You owe it to him to help. I closed my eyes, steadying myself. He called off the wedding. He insisted on putting everything in his name. But he assumed you'd contribute. He assumed we'd be married, I said. He ended that. There was a beat of silence, then she burst into dramatic, breathless sobs, the kind that sound designed for an audience. And just like that, she hung up on me after scolding me, crying at me, and blaming me for choices Brandon made with perfect clarity. A text arrived seconds later from his sister. He's having a panic attack. Those expenses will destroy him. Are you really going to let that happen? I stared at the screen and felt something dark and sharp settle into place inside me. He called off the wedding in public and expected me to pay for it. Yes, I'm going to let him handle that. I blocked her. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. Monday afternoon, the door camera on my phone lit up. Brandon stood outside my building lobby looking like he hadn't slept. He pressed the buzzer over and over until the sound felt like it was hammering my skull. I finally answered through the intercom. Dorothy, please, we need to talk. No, I said simply, we don't. I made a mistake, he rushed out. I was emotional, overwhelmed. I didn't mean what I said. You told me you don't love me anymore, I reminded him, in front of your friends. That's not what I meant. I was scared. You meant it enough to humiliate me publicly. That's what you meant. He swallowed, and his tone shifted instantly from apologetic to desperate. What about the wedding costs, Dorothy? I can't pay that. You have to help me. No, I said, I don't. I can't afford $62,000, he shouted. You should have thought about that before calling off the wedding. This is financial abuse, he snapped. I laughed not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. You put everything in your name. I didn't do that. You did. I'm not saving you from your consequences. I'll sue you. For what not marrying you, be my guest. He stood there another 10 minutes, crying loudly enough that people in the lobby looked over. Eventually, he left. And when the door finally shut behind him, the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a warning. On Tuesday, I got another call, this time from Lena, his closest friend. She had been planning to stand beside him at the ceremony. Her tone was thick with forced compassion. I know he messed up, Dorothy, but he's drowning. Can't you at least help with a few of the deposits? Why would I do that? I asked. Because you loved him. I did, I said, past tense. You're going to let him lose his apartment. That sounds like something he should have considered before making unilateral decisions. Her voice sharpened. How can you be so cold? How could he blindside me at brunch, I asked. We all make choices. She kept trying for 20 exhausting minutes. She tried guilt, logic, anger, sympathy. None of it landed. Eventually, I said, I'm done with this conversation, and hung up. I blocked her too, but Brandon wasn't finished. Wednesday morning, I woke to an email from his lawyer, a formal demand that I pay my share of the wedding expenses. My lawyer responded within hours. Brandon put everything in his name. Brandon called off the engagement. I had no obligations. The reply from his attorney was longer, more threatening. Listing legal terms meant to scare me. Promissory estoppel, unjust enrichment, emotional damages. My lawyer called me later with a tired sigh. He has no case. Any judge will throw it out. How much will it cost to defend if he actually files? I asked. Probably $5,000 to $10,000. I breathed in steady. Defend everything. I'm not paying him a cent. And that was when something clicked inside me. A clarity so sharp I could almost feel it cutting. Everyone kept acting as though I was punishing Brandon, as though I was cruel, but they weren't paying attention. Brandon didn't just end the wedding. He did it publicly. He chose humiliation for me as the delivery method. His friends laughed at me when I said I'd throw a dodged a bullet party. They laughed as if I were pathetic. But when the consequences landed on him instead of me, suddenly I was heartless. No, he asked the universe for independence. The universe granted it with exact precision. That afternoon, I sent out the invitations. Not to a wedding, to the party. 30 people confirmed within hours. My family, my coworkers, and surprisingly, 2 of Brandon's own friends, people who messaged me privately to say they were ashamed of him. The venue cost $800, nothing compared to the $62,000 Brandon had strapped to his own back. And as I sat in my living room, looking at the finalized guest list, I felt something I hadn't felt since brunch. Control, not revenge, not anger. Control. For once, this story belonged to me. I thought the worst of Brandon's behavior had already surfaced: the public breakup, the guilt campaigns, the legal threats. But the truth is, people often save their most unflattering selves for when they start to lose control. And Brandon was losing control fast. 10 days after the brunch incident, things escalated in ways I didn't expect. After blocking most of his family and friends, I'd finally found a fragile pocket of peace. I wasn't happy, but I was steady enough to breathe again. Then on Friday evening, I got a call from a mutual friend, a woman named Caroline, who rarely involved herself in drama. Her voice was tense. "Dorothy, you need to know what actually happened." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "Brandon didn't just panic. He didn't just get overwhelmed. He's been talking to someone, a woman from his gym." For a moment, I couldn't speak. It felt like someone was slowly pressing a hand into my chest. Caroline continued quietly. "He said nothing physical happened, but emotionally. It was definitely an affair. They'd been talking for 3 months. He thought he was in love with her." Her name, I later learned, was Lily Tran, Brandon's ex-girlfriend from years ago. The kind of person a man tells you never to worry about. "He ended your engagement to pursue her," Caroline said. "He actually told a couple of people he was choosing his happiness after realizing he's capable of love deeper than what he had." I felt something inside me collapse, but not in the frantic, gasping way heartbreak usually shows up. No. My collapse was quiet, deep, a sinking into truth that was never meant to be comforting. "He called off the wedding, thinking she'd welcome him into her arms," Caroline added. "But when she found out about the $62,000 in debt and the chaos he caused, she blocked him immediately. So that was it. Brandon didn't leave me because he fell out of love. He left me because he wanted a fantasy. And when the fantasy saw the bill, she ran." Caroline apologized again, but I barely heard her. I thanked her, hung up, and sat still for a long time. No tears, no shaking, just a dim realization that Brandon had lied so thoroughly, first to me, then to himself, that he mistook his own selfishness for destiny. I didn't owe him compassion. I owed myself honesty. And the truth was simple. If he had told me the real reason at brunch, I would have walked away anyway. On Monday, the next wave hit. When I got home from work, I spotted a familiar figure sitting in the lobby of my building, Brandon's younger sister, Paige. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. When she stood, her clothes hung looser than usual. "Please," she said, voice small. "Just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I nodded and gestured toward a lobby chair. She sat down and immediately burst into tears. "She's falling apart," Paige said. "She's lost 12 pounds. She's not sleeping. Collectors are already calling. She's spiraling." "Paige," I said gently, "none of that is my doing." "She knows she messed up," Paige insisted. "She knows she hurt you, but the punishment doesn't fit the crime." "What punishment?" I asked softly. "I'm not doing anything to him. I'm just not saving him from himself." "You have the money," Paige whispered. "You could help." "I also had a wedding. I had a future. I had dignity. He took all of those from me. I don't owe him my wallet on top of it." Her breath hitched. "She thought you'd always be there for her." Well, I said, leaning back, she was right until she dumped me at brunch for an emotional affair partner. Funny how that changes things. Paige blinked rapidly, shocked maybe that I finally said it aloud. "And the $150,000 from your uncle," she continued desperately. "Couldn't you ask him to give it anyway?" I stared at her. "You want me to ask my uncle to give Brandon, my ex-fiancé, who left me for someone else, $150,000 to pay off his wedding debt?" Paige swallowed. It would help him start over. I shook my head slowly. "Paige, you're delusional. Genuinely delusional." She flinched as if I slapped her. "You're being cruel." "No," I said. "I'm being fair. Brandon made choices. Big boy choices. And he gets big boy consequences." I stood. "We're done here." Paige broke down crying in the middle of my lobby. I walked upstairs without looking back. My hands were steady, my breathing even, not because I enjoyed any of it, but because something inside me had finally snapped into alignment. Compassion without boundaries was self-destruction, and I was done destroying myself for Brandon. The next day, I got something unexpected, a Facebook friend request from Lily, the woman from the gym. I accepted out of pure curiosity. She messaged instantly. "Hey, I didn't know he was engaged. He told me he was single. Wanted you to know." I stared at the message for a moment before replying. "Thanks." He called off our wedding. "Yeah, that sounds right," she wrote. "He told me you two were basically broken up already. He's been blowing up my phone, saying you ruined his life." "I didn't call off the wedding," I typed back. "I figured," she replied. "Good luck. He's intense." Then she unfriended me immediately. Honestly, I respected that. By Wednesday, everything escalated again. Brandon's attorney formally filed a lawsuit, actual legal documents this time. Breach of promise, unjust enrichment, emotional distress, the kind of claims desperate people make when they're grasping at straws. My lawyer barely blinked. "This won't hold," she said. "He's wasting time and money." "Let him," I replied. "He chose this battleground." Thursday night, Brandon did something reckless. Someone held the door for him, and he made his way inside my building. He pounded on my apartment door, hard enough to rattle it. "Dorothy, open up. We need to talk." I stepped back from the door and called building security. They came quickly and escorted him out while he shouted about how I was destroying his life, how I was heartless, how he had rights. Afterward, the building manager called me. "Ma'am," he said, "we've documented everything. He's banned from the property. If he comes back, we're calling the police." "Thank you," I breathed. He paused. "Can I ask, what did you do to him?" I answered honestly. "I didn't marry him." He laughed softly. "Fair enough." By Friday, I was finalizing headcount for the party. 32 attendees. Friends, family, co-workers. Even 2 of Brandon's friends who quietly told me they couldn't defend what he'd done. I approved the printing of a banner. Dodged a bullet. A celebration. When my mother asked if this was too harsh, I looked her in the eye and said, "He humiliated me at brunch. I'm not humiliating him. I'm celebrating myself." And for the first time in weeks, something inside me unclenched, like air returning to a room I hadn't realized was suffocating. Brandon's life was unraveling. Mine was just beginning to stabilize, and I still had no idea just how much more was coming. By the time the week of the party arrived, the chaos around Brandon had grown into its own weather system, loud, frantic spiraling. But around me, something strange was happening. Life was settling. Not peacefully, not completely, but enough for me to feel the ground beneath my feet again. I don't think Brandon understood that when he ended our engagement publicly, he also handed me something I didn't know I needed permission to walk away without guilt. And as he kept trying to drag me back into the storm of his consequences, my resolve only sharpened. I expected the next wave of drama to come from Brandon. Instead, it came from his father. It was Wednesday afternoon when my office phone rang, my direct line, which only a handful of people had. When I picked up, an unfamiliar voice growled, "This is Brandon's father." I didn't speak, I just waited. "I'm calling because you're destroying my son's life over your pride," he accused. "You two were supposed to get married. That debt belonged to both of you." I answered with steady calm. "Your son ended the wedding. He put all the expenses in his name. Those were his choices." "He made a mistake," he snapped. "People make mistakes. And they face consequences," I replied. "That's life." "I'm offering to mediate," he said, as if proposing a groundbreaking solution. "You pay half, he pays half. Clean slate." "No," I said. He inhaled sharply. "Why are you being so stubborn?" "Because I said your son chose to humiliate me at brunch in front of his friends. He ended our wedding for maximum impact. Now he expects me to clean up the mess he made alone. That's not stubbornness. That's self-respect." There was a beat of silence on his end. Then he tried something uglier. "We can't afford to help him," he said. "We have our own bills. If you don't help, he'll be ruined. You don't want that on your conscience." "I don't," I said. "But it won't be on mine. It'll be on his." And then he made a mistake. He tried threatening me. "I know people," he warned. "You're going to regret this." My voice stayed calm. "This state allows one-party consent on recorded calls. I have everything you just said." He hung up instantly. I stared at the receiver for a moment longer, then gently placed it back into its cradle. A surprising sense of relief washed through me. Not because I enjoyed confrontation, but because his threat revealed something vital. Brandon wasn't just desperate. His entire family was collapsing under the weight of his choices, and they all expected me to be the solution. I wasn't. 2 days later, on Friday, another revelation surfaced. A different mutual friend reached out this time, someone who wasn't close to Brandon, which meant the information had weight. "I didn't want to get involved," she began carefully. "But You should know the real reason he called off the wedding. My heart tightened. I already know about the woman from the gym. It's more than that, she said. He didn't just think he loved her. He was planning to pursue her seriously. He ended your engagement because he genuinely believed she was his soulmate. And when she found out about the debt and the chaos I finished for her, she ran. Exactly. She exhaled. He told people you were holding him back from real love. He didn't tell anyone he was emotionally cheating. He just made you out to be the villain. I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not pain, just clarity. I finally saw Brandon for who he truly was, a man who created disasters and expected everyone else to sweep up the shards. He wanted a new life. He got it, just not the one he imagined. On Monday evening, I walked into my building lobby after work and froze. Standing there again was Paige, his sister. Her eyes were swollen, and she clutched her phone like it was her last lifeline. "Please," she whispered, "just hear me out." "No," I said instantly. "Your father tried threatening me last week. I'm done." She flinched. "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to beg." I sighed and gestured toward the seating area. 5 minutes. She sat trembling. "He's falling apart," she said. "He's lost 12 pounds. He can't sleep. Collectors are calling nonstop. He says you're punishing him." "What punishment?" I asked. "Not paying someone else's debts isn't punishment. It's boundaries." "You don't understand," she cried. "He thought you'd always be there. He counted on you." "And I counted on him to not dump me at brunch," I said. "We were both wrong." She swallowed hard. "What if you just paid part of it, or talked to your uncle about the wedding gift? He meant it for both of you. Maybe he could still give it." I stared at her in disbelief. "You want me to ask my uncle for $150,000 to help the man who left me? Are you hearing yourself?" Paige broke down. "He's desperate, Dorothy." "So am I," said quietly. "Desperate to stop cleaning up after a grown man who hides behind everyone else when things get hard." I stood. "We're done." She collapsed into tears as I walked away. Something in me hardened, not out of cruelty, but clarity. Brandon didn't need me. He needed accountability. The next day I was preparing dinner when I got a Facebook friend request that made my heart pause. "Lily, the gym woman." I accepted. She messaged immediately. "Hey, I didn't know he was engaged. He told me he was single." I blinked. "He called off our wedding for you." "Yeah," she wrote, "and then told me you ruined his life." I stared at my phone. I didn't end the engagement. I figured, she replied. We stopped talking. "He's too much. Good luck." Then she unfriended me. Honestly, I respected her for that. Wednesday brought the next escalation, a formal lawsuit. Filed, active, real. Breach of promise, unjust enrichment, emotional distress. My lawyer laughed on the phone. His case is dead on arrival. "How much to defend it?" I asked. 8 to 12,000 if he pushes. Then we defend it. If Brandon wanted to weaponize the legal system, I wasn't going to roll over. Thursday night, he broke into the building again. Someone held the door open, and he pounded on my apartment door furiously. "Dorothy, open up. You're ruining my life." I didn't approach the door. I called building security, who escorted him out while he screamed about his rights. Afterward, the building manager called. "He's banned from the property," he said. "If he comes back, we're calling the police." He hesitated. "What did you do to him?" "I didn't marry him," I said. He laughed. "Fair enough." By Friday, all I cared about was the party. 32 confirmed guests. The banner ready. The decorations prepared. The drinks ordered. My mother questioned it gently. "Isn't this harsh?" But I shook my head. "Mom," I said, "he humiliated me publicly. This isn't revenge. This is closure." And for the first time since that brunch, I felt like Dorothy again, not a victim, not a target, not a cleanup crew. A woman reclaiming her own story. The day of the dodged a bullet party arrived with surprising stillness. I woke up without dread for the first time in weeks. No buzzing phone, no frantic messages from Brandon's family, no threats, pleas, or guilt trips. Just quiet. Peaceful, unfamiliar quiet. I got ready slowly, almost ceremonially. A soft dress, loose curls, a touch of makeup. Nothing extravagant, just enough to feel like myself again. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the woman who walked out of brunch shaking, blindsided, humiliated. I saw someone steadier. Someone who'd survived a storm she never asked for. The venue was a small bar Brandon and I had once thought about using for a rehearsal dinner. Irony is rarely subtle. When I walked in, the lights were warm, the music soft, and the giant banner hanging above the bar made me stop in my tracks. Dodged a bullet, a celebration. A few early guests clapped when they saw me. My closest friends hugged me tightly. Even two of Brandon's own friends, people who had witnessed his spiral firsthand, showed up offering quiet, awkward smiles that said more than any apology could. 32 people in total, more than I expected, more than I needed, enough to feel held. As the night unfolded, laughter echoed louder than I'd ever anticipated. People toasted to new beginnings, to self-respect, to painful truths that become liberating once spoken aloud. My best friend Marissa raised her glass and declared, "To Dorothy, who didn't just dodge a bullet, she dodged a whole firing squad." Everyone roared. I laughed too genuinely fully, without the hollowness I'd been carrying. We took photos under the banner, smiling, goofy, triumphant. I didn't tag Brandon. I didn't even mention him. This night wasn't for him. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. When the party ended, I walked home with tired feet and a lighter heart. I didn't yet know what the next morning would bring. The next day around mid-afternoon, my phone rang. Brandon's mother. The moment I answered, she began screaming. "How dare you humiliate my son publicly?" That banner, those photos. How could you do something so cruel? I breathed in slowly. I didn't mention him once. I threw a party with my friends. "You know exactly what you were doing," she cried. "He saw the photos. He's devastated." "Good," I said quietly. "He needs to sit with the fallout of his own choices." "He's talking about bankruptcy, Dorothy. Do you understand that?" "Yes," I replied. "That's what happens when you take on $62,000 of debt you can't afford and then lose the person who was going to help you pay it." "You could stop all of this," she shouted. "Just help him with some of the money." I closed my eyes. "Why would I asked. "Because he didn't just break up with me. He did it at brunch in front of his friends, designed for maximum humiliation. Because he put everything in his name to prove his independence. Because he tried to guilt me, sue me, and harass me into paying for choices I didn't make. Because he expects me to always clean up after him." Her voice cracked. "Because you loved him." "Past tense," I said. "And love doesn't mean funding someone's consequences." She hung up on me sobbing. I didn't cry, not this time. The final blow to Brandon's crusade came the following week. My lawyer called first thing in the morning. The judge dismissed his case. I blinked. "Already?" "Immediately," she said. The judge told his lawyer to advise him to stop wasting the court's time. I smiled a small private smile, the kind that grows only after surviving something quietly brutal. A few hours later, my father called. "You won't believe who showed up at our house," he said. I didn't need to guess. "Brandon." "Yes," Dad replied. "He came in crying, begging me to talk sense into you. Said he was going to lose everything. Wanted us to give him the money since we were basically family." I let out a bitter laugh. "What did you say?" I said, "You called off the wedding. You're not family, and my daughter doesn't owe you anything." Then I closed the door. Something in my chest loosened. "Thank you." "Dorothy," he said softly, "I'm proud of you. A lot of people would have folded under the pressure, but you didn't. You stood your ground." I swallowed hard. It didn't feel strong. It felt necessary. "Strength often does," he said. In the weeks that followed, Brandon's life truly unraveled. He moved back in with his parents. He broke his apartment lease, more fees. He worked 2 jobs trying to claw back at a debt he'd created single-handedly. His credit tanked. The collections calls intensified. He applied for debt consolidation. Nothing looked hopeful. People kept asking me if I felt bad. Honestly, no, not even a flicker. Brandon made every choice that led him here. He chose the emotional affair. He chose to call off the wedding publicly. He chose to put all the expenses in his name. He chose to sue me. He chose to lie, manipulate, threaten, and weaponize guilt. I simply chose not to rescue him. Meanwhile, my life grew quiet, peaceful, mine again. I had my grandmother's ring appraised. I considered selling it, letting it go the way I let him go. The apartment felt lighter without him. I even started dating again casually, without pressure, just breathing. Financially, I was only out about $10,000 party costs and legal fees. Brandon, $62,000 in deposits, several thousand more in legal fees, moving costs, destroyed credit, a reputation in pieces. When someone asked me if seeing him struggle made me want to help, I answered honestly, no, not even a little. This was never about money. It was about respect. Brandon disrespected me in the worst possible way, publicly, deliberately, cruelly, and then expected me to carry him through the consequences. Life doesn't work that way. Neither do I. He wanted independence, and he got it. Completely. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone solve their own problems, especially when they spent years expecting you to solve them for them. And as for the party, it really was the best money I'd spent in years. Life is good now. Quiet, steady, mine. And I have no regrets.